Kia ora, good morning. Welcome to the Eye in the Sky Show podcast. So, today we're going to be talking about the Nomoli figurines and what I discovered. A video dropped in my lap when I was doing research for future podcasts, and it piqued my interest. And because I'm an intuitive podcaster, when something piques my interest, I know, I'm being told to look down that line for inquiry. So I did some research, and what I found was actually really interesting. Now, I'm not just covering on my podcast the paranormal and the supernatural, the unsolved mysteries, the unexplained phenomenons. I'm also going to be covering mythology, religion, urban myths and legends, the whole kit and caboodle, keeping it interesting. So, there's just so many unanswered questions out in the world, and as a high priestess and an occult scientist and a gatekeeper, it's my job to help people find answers to things that may have been confusing or perplexed them or scared them, or made them question reality, evolution, faith, that sort of thing. You don't have to believe everything that I'm saying. I'm not here for everybody, and that's completely fine. I'm only there to put it out there for those who get me, for those who find my work insightful and helpful in helping them have their own ascensions and deal with past life traumas and childhood traumas, and the wounded inner child, and when I can bring these answers to you and fill in the missing puzzle pieces to your life and your evolutionary process, then I'm helping you ascend and helping you find peace in this life, so that it's not something you're forced to do in the next life. Get it right this time so you don't have to come back next time. So the Nomoli figures were found in Sierra Leone by some diamond miners in a cave, and they seem to have defied logic because they're reported to be anywhere between 4,000 and 19,000 years old. They were found with, some of them were found with little metallic balls inside them, which predate, the common understanding of when chromium and steel were being used, because when they looked at them, they found that they were made up of chromium and steel, which for the time, way predates, what they should have. So it confused people. However, I also found out that limestone, granite and soapstone, which these figurines are made of, are really hard to date. Apparently stone is like really hard to date. You can be off by tens of thousands of years, sort of thing. It's really hard to date. So the exact age of these figurines, it's not an exact science, unfortunately. So everything is just hypotheses and suppositions and all that sort of thing. But what I discovered is that the Mendi people used these figurines, and some believe that they were used as protection. Some people, they were used to honor the dead. Some are reported to have like big bodies and small heads. Some are reported to have big heads and small bodies, reptilian heads. They represent people from different ethnicities and all that sort of thing, and they were found underground, and people were thinking, well, they were either like, figurative statues, or they were talismans, or they were, burial like amulets and that, to protect the dead. But what I found was really interesting. Now, when I looked at the design of these Nomoli figurines, see, the Mendi believed that they were angels who fell from heaven, and because they were naughty while they were down here, God banished them to keep them here on earth as punishment. So they're basically fallen angels. That's what they believed. And apparently the word Nomoli is it Nomoli? means heaven. Um, uh, the link's in the description box below. I should have written it down. That's so unprofessional of me. But this all matters. I'm telling you now. So when I looked up African mythology, I found something very, very interesting. And that is in South Africa, the Zulus had a wee beastie called and I apologize if you're from South Africa, if you're African, if I pronounce this wrong, I do apologize. But the Tokoloshi is a beastie who was called upon by witch doctors and dark occult practitioners to cause panic and create havoc within a community. If you had one within your community, a Sangoma or Zulu witch doctor was called to exorcise the area. Apparently, this is the reason why the Zulu people started raising their beds up, putting their beds on, like bricks and things like that to raise their bed up, because it was the belief that the Tokoloshi would come while you were sleeping and scratch you and attack you and give you bad dreams and give you nightmares and basically terrorize you. Now, if you remember, the Mendi believe that these Nomoli figurines were, fallen angels. So, like the Tokoloshi or the Tokoloshi, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm so sorry. Apparently, the Tokoloshi would even kill people in their sleep, because apparently seemingly healthy people would go to bed at night and then they would, I was going to say wake up dead, then their loved ones would wake up and they'd be dead. Which, if you didn't understand chemistry and natural gases and, oxygen and air and all that sort of thing, back in those days, it was perfectly natural for people's superstitions to kick in and have them think that it was because of mythological beasts and creatures. But the popular modern consensus is that they were dying from carbon dioxide poisoning because they were sleeping close to fires in their huts, and that they were sleeping close to fires on the ground, to keep them warm during the cold winter months. Back then they wouldn't have known that, but that's the general consensus of why they think these people died in their sleep. Now, the interesting thing is that the reptilian heads that some of these creatures had, when I saw it, this is what piqued my interest. I automatically saw the Egyptian god Sobek, because he's one of my ancestral gods. Now, Sobek is a god with a crocodile head, and he is the god of fertility, military, protection, and he not only had magical powers, but he used his magic to protect people and amulets from harm, from misfortune, from the evil eye, from negative influences, and from people threatening you and trying to do you harm or willing harm upon you. And so I thought, well, how would the Zulu have had information, like how would they know about Sobek? Because what it seems like is that they had some talismans that were put in the ground because they were doing harm to the community, and then they had the other talismans, the figurines there to protect them from that harm. So the ones with the reptilian heads were Sobek, who was there to protect from the dangers of black magic and the evil eye and curses and that sort of thing. And then the ones that were put in the ground, because they were believed to be doing harm. So I was thinking, how is that possible? So I looked up the history of the migration of the Zulu. So it is without a doubt that the Zulu people would have gone as far as places like Sierra Leone, and then they would have passed on their myths and legends to, the people of Liberia and Sierra Leone, to the Mendi people, and that's how that would have happened. But what I discovered more than that was even more fascinating, because I found an article, and I'll put a link in the description box below, that actually suggests that the Zulu people actually, their origins come from China, and that the Chinese people that they came from had an emperor who wore the same kind of headdresses as them. They had almost identical practices and beliefs. And their emperor, their god, was called the god of heaven. And of course, these statues were called heaven, or from heaven, heaven. Um, and what it looks like is that if this is true, and the Zulu people did originate from China, as they immigrated, they would have come down through Egypt and picked up Sobek as one of their gods, and knowing that Sobek was the god for protection and military prowess, because everybody knows that the Zulu Nation were one of the fiercest warrior nations in the world. Like, their strength in battle, their military prowess is world famous throughout history. And that is what Sobek is the god of military prowess and military strength, and because he is also the god of fertility, so bountiful harvests and having lots of babies, and um, protecting you from the evil eye, and from black magic and all that sort of thing. It seems like they came from China, and they picked up various cultural and superstitious beliefs along the way from, like, Greece as well. There's traces of the Zulu people having connections to Greece. So I think as they migrated, they came through China and then through the Mediterranean and down through Egypt, and picked up these beliefs along the way, took them down to South Africa where there was nowhere else to go, and then went up across through Sierra Leone, taking these Nomoli figurines with them, that ended up being what the people from Liberia and Sierra Leone then started using to practice with, to protect themselves with. When you look at a photo of the Tokoloshi, it's identical to these figures, to the point where they even have the holes in them where they put the little metallic balls. Now, what I found was this: the metallic balls that were made of steel and chrome. Steel is an alloy. Steel is an alloy made of carbon and iron. Both were readily available at the time of the Iron Age. Chrome was added to steel to make it corrosion and discoloration resistant by adding chromium to make stainless steel. And stainless steel wasn't something that was sort of really around until like the 18th century. However, the fact that it was added to these little figurines means that, because they didn't corrode, they were, for as old as what they were, these balls apparently were in perfect condition. So somewhere along the line, the Zulu people picked up the ability to take like an Iron Age practice and do something with it that had never been done before. And people keep saying, well, like, it defies logic that these people would know how to make stainless steel, because they're basically, these balls were made from stainless steel, and stainless steel wasn't something that was really a thing until like the 19th century. But we're underestimating the intelligence of our ancient ancestors, because like cavemen, like our ancient ancestors, the beginners of our migrant evolutionary journey, they were able to do things like perform complex brain surgery on people. They reckon it was to release evil spirits from the brain, when they suffered from migraines and headaches. And the people that they did the brain surgery on, when they drill the holes in the brain to let the evil spirits out, they would go on to live, like they would survive. So they were doing complex brain surgery, back in caveman times, and were successful with it, you know. And they also, they discovered music, you know, the singing voice and the drum and the flute was all created by our Stone Age man, and they invented boats. Without them, none of us would be anywhere in the world, that were landlocked, or, the Vikings wouldn't have gone over to discover America, and they wouldn't have come to invade New Zealand to create the Moriori's, and, like none of us would be anywhere if it wasn't for the invention of the boat. My people went from Egypt to New Zealand, Hawaii and all that, like we have the Navy and the Marines because of the invention of the boat that came from our Stone Age man, our seemingly uncultured man. They invented sewing needles. They invented the art of being able to sew clothes together. They invented shoes. Um, Spears, obviously, being able to hunt for food. They invented art. Without them, we wouldn't have any artist in the world today, because they invented art to put on display, to tell their story, to show their journey. My people put our art on our bodies. We tell our story through what we tattoo on our bodies. But if it wasn't for our Stone Age man, our ancient man, we wouldn't have art galleries. We wouldn't have people like Dali and Van Gogh and Monet and any of them, So we have a lot to be grateful for. So we're underestimating the intelligence of men. They're assuming just because they were, like African, an African fighting nation, that they didn't know how to, mix chrome and steel. Just because it's only been recently discovered since the 19th century doesn't mean that there's not bits of it floating about. We're finding things that defy logic all the time, like that watch, that tiny little watch. Like, we don't know everything, and this is the beautiful thing about the kind of work that I'm doing to bring these podcasts to you, because I'm helping find solutions and answers that weren't there before. Pottery. Our Stone Age man invented pottery. Without the invention of pottery, we wouldn't have been able to store any of our food when we went off on our boats to discover far off lands. And there is something called the lysors, or the lysors, and it's a tool that's still being used today in leathercraft that Stone Age man invented. So we don't know everything, and it's ignorant of us to assume that we would think that just because they were like a nation of heathens, or uneducated tribes, or people who had no access to the modern world, or savages, or brutalists, or anything like that. Whatever modern man's opinion of ancient men is, it's ignorant of us and wrong of us, clearly, to assume that they didn't know more than us, or some things better than us, just because we can't explain how they knew to do what they did. Doesn't mean that we know more than them, or that what they did was wrong, or that it came from bloody aliens. Oh my Lord in heaven, aliens get blamed for everything just like Satan does. It's unbelievable, because it can't be explained. Oh, it's got to be aliens. But, this whole thing of it being aliens is because the Mendi believed that they were fallen angels, that they represent the fallen angels. Now, does this mean that the people who became the Zulu were kicked out of China? Like like the Maori people were kicked out of Egypt because we were naughty? So we had to find new lands to go to because we were naughty. I don't know. I'm certainly not going to suggest that's what it is. But somewhere along the line, a story was told where some people were naughty, and it was translated into these Nomoli figurines. The Māori people, our genetics are traced back to Egypt, and it is the common belief that we, migrated because we were naughty. So I'm just saying, it would certainly explain why there's so many different features on these figurines that look like they're from different cultures from around the world, because they seem to be telling the story of the Zulu people's migration from China through the Mediterranean and down through Africa to where they, settled in South Africa. Um, but I think it's a wonderful piece of undiscovered history that is proving to modern man, to modern civilization, that our ancient ancestors, no matter where they came from or where they originated from, they knew more than what we give them credit for. So, just food for thought there, guys. I'm going to put a link in the description box below. But when you see what these figurines look like, and then you see the Tokoloshi, and again, I do apologize if I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong. Um, I think you'll realize I'm on the right track because they're almost identical to look at. So I'll put links in the description box below. And until next time, ka kite anō.